Welcome to Turnover Takedown. This is our webinar just about all things that lead to turnover and how you can build a team that lasts. We're going to have a lot of great tips for you guys today. So my name's Anna Christensen, and I'm here with Suman Cherry, and we work at Cherry Talent Group. We are recruiters, HR, organizational development. We just do all things people for our clients. So we're looking forward to sharing some data with you guys today and some stories and some tips and tricks about just how to improve retention. And we'll have a Q&A at the end. So turnover, we're going to talk about what does it look like this day and age for us and what are its cost implications. Also, why people are leaving companies and ways to really stop that from happening. Because, retention is good for all of us, right? What are some of the benefits of improving retention? And then we'll open it up for questions. Turnover by the numbers, right? In 2022, that was what everyone's calling the Great Resignation, right? I think we all really felt that it was kind of that post-COVID era where over 50 million people voluntarily left their companies. We saw a little bit of reprieve from that over the last couple of years. And predictions at the end of last year for 2025 are that we were going to see numbers closer to those 2022 numbers. I think now with a possible looming recession, that those numbers might not be as high, but so we'll have to see what happens in 2025.
Yeah, I mean, this is very interesting to look at. Anna loves numbers. So I'll kind of explain it from sort of the perspective of like what I'm seeing in the industry, right? So, 2022, I think it was just comes really back to COVID, like you mentioned. I think during the time of COVID, everyone came back home. They changed their lifestyles, right? People realized like, hey, my mental health matters, my family matters, I need more, right? So they went out and they were like, and things were shifting. There were a lot of jobs, right? People were making a lot of shifts, and so we were like, oh, let's go find that next job. So I think that's what you're seeing. 23, sort of some of that as well. I think as you're moving into 25, what you're seeing and like what you said is I do think there are people that aren't engaged at their organizations that probably do want to make shifts and are wanting to move, but aren't. And the flip side of that is great, you keep them, but the flip side on the other side of that is, are they the right people for your organization and are they really engaged? We can talk about that more, but not having engagement with your employees is an issue as far as them leaving, but also what they're producing within the organization. So I think that's what you're seeing in 25.
Yeah, and guys, Suman has over 25 years of experience just doing all things people, from recruiting to HR. And so she's going to have a lot of just real world advice for us, as well as some stories. And I'm going to have some data as well. So that cost of turnover, I was thinking like, what is really the cost of turnover, right? And I think the number we've all heard pretty consistently is that it costs 33% of an employee salary to replace them. But when you really dig in and look at what's happening out there, it can go up to as much as 400%, just depending on tenure, what are the job responsibilities, the job duties, what level is that person in your organization. So I found this really cool turnover calculator out there, and I will share this presentation and all of these links with you guys after the webinar today. But you can plug in, what is your average salary? How many people did you lose last year? About the average amount of time it took you to replace them, and you can get your true turnover cost. And you can make this, if you hit advanced calculation, you can really dig into what's that costing just in pure money, the financial impact, but as well as like what's it costing in job loss and job dissatisfaction. There's all these things that really go into the cost of turnover.
Yeah, and I think this is a really important piece because it does cost a lot of money and when you hire someone that doesn't work out, right? Just from if you're using a recruiter, the cost of that, right? The cost of time, taking people away from their other roles to fill these positions. Also the time, really the salary, the bonuses and the training or anything else you're doing for that person. And there's a caveat to this because people who leave, if you hire someone and they stay 18 months, typically there's not a lot of value because you're putting a lot of value into them and you're putting a lot of time and energy into them. So the value isn't going to be as high as someone. And then the other flip side, if you lose someone after 10 years, what does that valuable look like? Even more than a financial place, because how much responsibility are they taking on with their organization? I mean, there's so many times where I see where people leave an organization and they've taken on the roles of multiple roles, and then companies have to scramble and almost hire 2 or 3 people to make up for that loss. So it is a big deal when people leave, for sure, financially. And we'll talk about more things around it, but the financial aspect is huge for sure.
Yeah, and also some ways to hopefully prevent that from happening, right? I think we have some pretty easy solutions for companies that you can even tackle as early as tomorrow
Right.
that are going to really help keep people around. So why are people leaving? I don't think anything here is going to be really shocking, right? But the big one is, career growth, that need for advancement. I think as humans, we like opportunity. We're not necessarily, we don't want to stay stagnant, right? So that's been the highest one really year over year for a while. Just again, looking for that new opportunity. And another one that I think is it's pretty buzzy. A lot of people are talking about it right now is this idea of work-life balance. And health and family was actually in this study. And I think those really go hand in hand, just people dealing with, how do they balance it all, right? Career and the things happening outside of their jobs. And then you have, job duties and compensation, which are there, right? I think people always think like money's the reason, but Suman will tell you, right, that it's not always, and it's certainly not the highest reason in this study as well. And then another one we'll talk about today is culture and leadership. Those are big ones too. Just in having a healthy culture and having emotionally intelligent leaders is going to go a long way for retention.
Yeah, and I think this is like always a surprising thing when I talk to candidates or we talk to clients is that this realization that oh they're leaving because of more money. But we talk to candidates all the time that are maybe it's a little bit more money, but it's really not the motivation. The pain is like what you just said, the career growth. I don't see an opportunity. I don't see myself able to advance within the organization. I see myself doing the same things all the time. I'm bored. I'm stagnant. I want more challenges because that is how human beings are. We do want more challenges, especially the type of employees that you want. They're always going to be looking for the next challenge. How can they grow? How can they expand? And I think the health and family, work life balance, I think there's this misconception like, oh, everyone was work from home. But I don't, that's not what we're talking about. And we're going to talk about that more. But I think it's more about understanding your people and where they are in their lives and what they're going through so you can support them. And I would say, I know that based on this, like the leader, but I would say leadership, I believe it's always leadership. Like I think people leave because they don't have the type of leadership that's supporting them and they don't feel like they're heard or seen. And I think all those things play into that. So we can go into more detail, but like I can go, Anna and I could stay on this thing for like 5 hours and we could talk about this. So we won't. But
We can. We'll keep
okay.
you guys for,
Yeah.
just a little while,
Yeah.
but we could really talk about it forever. And as Suman's point, even on the leadership spot, there's a lot of easy things that you can do to kind of get your leaders to a place that they're more emotionally intelligent. And we've all been there. We have some good tips for you guys. So really, and Suman will definitely confirm this, but all of these tips we'll give you for retention, it really boils down to two main buckets, two big ideas, right? What are the two things that are really the root cause of keeping people at your company? The first one is culture. So really, not just the buzzy like values and things that you think about that you put on your wall, right? But what's your framework? What's the foundation of your company? And also connection. Connection's going to be a big one, guys. Communication, having open and honest communication, truly listening to your people, listening to feedback, and really seeking to understand who they are.
Yeah, and I think they really come hand in hand, right? The culture piece, and I say this all the time, it's like we don't just stick it on the wall, right? It's like we live our core values. Like this is what our standards are as an organization. And those processes and those accountability metrics, they create the framework of how your company what your core values are as an organization. So it's really easy to understand if people are falling into that or not. And so the connection piece comes into knowing your people, right? Understanding who they are, understanding where they are, and also having that communication. So if you see someone a high performer and something's off a little bit, you are able to go back to this connection place and see like, hey, why did you miss those numbers? What is going on? Because we're not jumping to this like place of they're leaving or they're not doing their job or we're creating a whole story. No, we're going back to, hey, this is our values as an organization. This is the process. And we're asking you to choose to stand in that standard. And so if someone's not, then it's up to you to have that connection conversation before they start putting their resume out there and start looking. And it really comes down to communication, connection, and being able to go back to that framework of what you've created for the organization as well.
When we talk to clients and we're looking to recruit someone that's a replacement, we're always like, so why did the last person leave? And they're like, we don't know. It came out of nowhere,
Right.
right? But did it?
But did it.
Right. And I think communication is one of those things that it's so easy to drop that when we get busy.
Right.
Right. When we get busy, when we get overwhelmed, maybe those one-on-ones that are always on your calendar, you kind of start to push those, right?
Yeah.
Or you can't really be in the moment because there's so much going on, and that's normal, right? We're human.
Right.
But I think again, to your point, Suman, keeping that strong connection is going to go a long way for retention, which is going to improve your productivity and your profitability.
Yeah, and I think the thing about the culture piece, when you have the framework, it creates less chaos. Because I think what ends up happening as organization, when you don't have a framework of your processes, your accountability, the core values for your people, then there's a scattering of energy, and then someone doesn't know what this is, and and then there's a lot going on. So instead, if you have this framework, then you're able to always go back to connection to ask the question as to like why, like what's going on, and like you said, we get busy. I do it too, we get busy, but your people are really the backbone of your organization. Without your people, you're not going to grow. You're not going to be able to fulfill your own mission as an organization. So it is very important to make sure that you are talking to your people for sure and communicating with them and connecting. And I think you had pointed out a really good point. Like, it's not just about connection where you just go in and tell them all the things they're doing wrong, right? It's also connection as like asking them who they are, what's going on with their life, things you've noticed about them, things you're seeing, and like, how can we help you? How can we bring more value to you, right? So it's having that openness where your employees feel safe and really feel safe to be able to have that transparency. So yes.
Yeah, you guys are going to hear us mention connection a lot.
Yes.
We should do a little game. Maybe we drop it in the chat at the end.
Yes.
How many times did we say it?
Yes.
The closest one gets a prize, right,
Yeah,
Suman?
for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And guys, as you have questions as we go, feel free to go ahead and drop those in the chat, and we can tackle them all at the end. But we're going to jump through just some of those things we see, like those main reasons people are leaving, or maybe not the main ones per se, but the ones that are going to be easy for you to implement solutions to, right? So this first one, career development and growth, we saw that was the biggest one on the Work Institute survey. It is year over year. And really, it's just employees, they want to grow, they want to see, development and advancement in their careers. And that's ultimately going to make them more engaged, it's going to increase motivation and make them more loyal if they see themselves, growing with the organization. And just a stat for you guys, because I like the statistics, 64% of employees said they would leave their current job for one offering career advancement. Not even necessarily more money. I think Suman will attest to that. But are they getting those advancement opportunities?
Yeah, and I think advancement opportunities is more than title, right? And we talked about this before. I mean, advancement opportunities is the ability to have curiosity over other things they're interested in. I mean, I like to think of everything as we're always in a season of mastery, right? We're always in a season of mastering something for ourselves, and whether it be in our personal lives or it all kind of goes in together. So as employees, you want to be mastering a new thing. So if you've been doing the same thing all the time and you haven't had an opportunity to try something new, or like you were talking about, even cross training with other departments and learning other things, that creates a curiosity. And I think the biggest mistake employers make is they just don't want to have a conversation because they're just uncomfortable with the conversation. Like they think, well, I don't have another role for them. I don't have anything else. It's not about that. It's about just having the conversation, having the connection, asking the questions. Where do you see yourself? What would be, you've been here for 5 years. What are other things you're interested in? And figuring out ways to plug them into that. Because the thing is that when people are engaged, they're 85% more productive anyway. So if you get someone who's been doing something the same way, the same thing all the time, and the engagement's low, shifting that from a curiosity standpoint is going to help with the productivity, and it's going to help with the business as well and your growth.
And I think just again, like you said, being open to those conversations. So something we dropped in our solution list here is those regular performance evaluations, whether that's every 6 months or once a year. And making sure that those are a two-way street, right? Have your people come to you with what else do they want to do for the organization? How can they grow their role? What are their goals, right? And then you can talk about what you need them to do. And it's really that two-way communication. And something I've done in my career that I always loved is cross-departmental training. As a marketing person, as a business development person throughout my career, I've done ride-alongs with construction managers. I've hung out with project managers. I've sat with finance. It's a great way to just learn new skills and see what else is out there, see those opportunities without necessarily, like, it's not always about a promotion, as you said.
Yeah, and I think it also builds deeper connection within the team because I think when you have deeper connection in the team, people are more engaged and people are less likely to leave, right? Ultimately, what you always want to be creating in your organization is opportunity for people to feel engaged, people to feel seen, and people to feel heard, and people to feel connected. Because when people feel connected in their organization, if they have an issue with something, they're going to feel comfortable to share that with you. And before they go off and look for another job, because once they've made the choice, like, I want a new role, it's difficult at that point because in the engagement, even if they spend 6 months looking for a role, how long are they disengaged when they're focusing on that other job, right? That they want. So if you can nip this in the bud and create that engagement pretty quickly on, make sure you're connecting with them, asking what they want to do. This is going to go a long way with keeping people at your organization for sure. And I know we're going to talk about this and we mentioned it before, but this regulation piece around emotions with leaders, this is really where it comes into it because I think sometimes leaders, and I'm not throwing anyone on the bus, but I think sometimes managers, we can get a little defensive with our process, a little defensive with our company. And I think it's important to be able to like hear your people, right? I think it's really important to see the truth. If you have a turnover issue, there's nothing to be ashamed about with it. It's not we have to blame someone else for that, like the market or people just want more money or people don't want to work or whatever the reasons are. It's like, let's look at it as an opportunity for truth. Like, why is this happening? And I promise you, if you go back to connection and transparency and framework, that's where you're going to see the disconnect for sure.
Yeah, and I think learning if there is a problem or an issue in your organization that's causing people to leave, I think knowing that early on, it's going to really help like mitigate some of those cost implications, the loss of productivity, right? It's going to
Right.
be better for everyone overall.
Yeah.
I think if you catch those things early on.
Right. For sure. Absolutely.
So another one, and this is kind of buzzy out there, right? Everyone's talking about it, is this idea of work-life balance. And guys, what we're not talking about work from home, right? I think those are often associated, but this idea of work-life balance, it goes even deeper. It's about health, it's about family, it's about well-being. I mean, life has gotten increasingly more difficult, right? It's more expensive, it's busier. I'm a working parent, Suman is too. Like, we know we deal with it with all the kid things, and really everybody has something, right? When you look at just competing demands, right? Cost of childcare has gone up, cost of elderly care. There's a lot of people out there like having to take care of their parents, or elderly relatives, scheduling conflicts. Right? Don't get me started on the fact that school was only from what, Suman, like 8:30 to
Yes.
3? Like, how do we make that work as parents,
Right.
right?
Right.
So people are dealing with all of these things. In fact, 28%, that's a third of people who voluntarily left their jobs did so for better work-life balance. Not necessarily working from home, but just having the flexibility and having the empathy from their leaders to handle all of the things life is throwing at them.
Yeah, because I think it's really important to understand that is at the end of the day, we're all human. And just like businesses have seasons, we as humans have seasons. And so if you're noticing that your top performers are the ones that are usually really engaged and there's something going on, it's important to have these conversations so you can understand what's going on. So there is that flexibility with saying, "Hey, what is going on? I'm struggling with this," like on a family level. Because a lot of times we talk to candidates and they're leaving because of this and they've never brought it up to their employers. And I'm like, well, and we're like, why? They're like, I don't feel safe to, I don't feel comfortable to, they're not going to care. They're going to, and so it's like, it's important as a leader to be able to have the emotional intelligence and the connection to be able to figure out what's going on. Because like you said, this is life. We are dealing with a lot. We do, we have a lot of other things outside of work that we're dealing with. So it's important that we, as organizations, as leaders, to understand our people, to have compassion, to have empathy. I'm not talking about having it where it be something it's a disadvantage or someone's taking advantage of it. I'm talking about if you can have communication and connection around it, then you have an idea what's going on so you can help people with this work-life balance. Because it could be as simple as I had a candidate one time who was literally just wanting to leave his job because he could not go see his daughter play soccer on Fridays. And that was the most important thing for him in his life. And it was causing so many issues that he couldn't be there. And he switched his job because of it. And he took less money. It was just because he could be there with his daughter on soccer. And we hear stories like that all the time from candidates. People always think it's about the money. I'm not making enough money, but it's not. It's about the value that they're not being seen and they don't feel connection within the organization, for sure.
And I think, part of that connection piece, there we're saying it again, right? In those personal check-ins, understanding what is important to that person.
Yes.
Because everybody is going to have different things, right?
Right.
For this candidate, it was soccer. And I
Right.
think that would probably looking back, especially if they had a lot of tenure, if they were a great employee, looking back, I would think their leadership would have been like, man, we should have made it work so that we could go to the soccer games,
Right,
right?
right.
That would have been better for everyone.
Exactly. So, and I think that is where I'm going to go back to connection. This is where the connection piece comes in, because when you're connecting with your people, they can share what's going on in their life. Because again, we have seasons, we have things that we go through. We're human beings. We all have things. So, and it's much more expensive to have to hire someone and start all over than lose a great candidate on our great employee, just to be honest. And we do this for a
Absolutely.
living. So we want you to hire us, but we also want you to keep your people, because great people bring a lot of value for organizations. Like really,
I,
they really do.
I had a manager once. We've all worked for different kinds of leaders, right? I had a manager in my career who we would have a weekly check-in. We were all very busy, right? So I didn't always talk to her except for this one. I knew without fail she would be there. And it was just a 30-minute conversation. And the first 10 minutes of it were just for me to say whatever I needed to say, what is on my mind, what am I dealing with, what roadblocks do I have, and what can she help me with? It was always about, she's like, you bring to the table, what can I help you solve for the next coming week? And then the last 20 minutes we would talk about work stuff and what she needed from me and projects we had going on. But I loved having just that 10 minutes, and I did feel heard. And she would help me kind of mitigate any issues I was having for that coming week. And I really thought that was a great thing for a leader to do.
And think about that. I mean, how many years down the road has it been, right? 10, 15 years since that time. And you remember that because it's so unusual. Whereas this should be the usual thing. This should be how it is. But yet, like, that was unusual for you because in most of the cases, it's not like that. There is a lack of connection and it's mostly transactional. But you had a connection based manager and you remember that. So that's something to think about, right? Because and you probably really loved being in that organization and you felt seen and you felt served and you felt supported. And that's really what it comes down to. That's the whole point of it. That's the secret sauce. Support your people.
More Stephen, we're telling everyone.
Yes, we are.
So, unhappiness and with their job, the compensation piece, that's there, that's a factor. But really, I think that where that comes from is just this feeling of being bored, being burnt out, not feeling appreciated, right? And so we think about like, man, that's kind of an easy one to fix, right? Just, like you said, saying thank you, really making people feel heard and seen in their roles. So 79% of employees who quit their jobs cited a lack of appreciation as a primary reason for leaving. And probably the reality is they were incredibly appreciated, right? But they just didn't hear it and feel it.
Right. And I think that also comes down to the leadership, right? Because I think there is like an older way of managing people that's a little bit more fear based, a little bit more micromanaging based, a little bit more reactive based. And the thing is even if you give a million accolades to this person, if they're also that on the other side, that's what they're feeling. So it's a tricky situation because yes, we need to appreciate our people. We need to say thank you, but like it's more than saying thank you. It's actually like there is the money piece. Like it's true. Like we hear it all the time. Like candidates who've been in a company for 10 years, they are like, "Hey, they just posted another job. They're paying them $20,000. They're offering $20,000 more. I'm asking for that and they're not giving it to me. And they're giving me the runaround like, "Oh, well, da da da." They're going to find out about it, right? So you do need to pay your people what they're worth for sure. And appreciation comes from all the pieces, communication, connection. Like it's more than just saying thank you. It's also about like involving them, caring about what they say, valuing their opinion and implementing some of the things they say as well, right? I think that's another piece. Like we get so stuck as leaders or business owners or managers that our way is the only way. Our way is the best way. We've been doing it this way forever, but your people are sharing other input. It's that also feels seen. Like people feel really seen when they can be part of the process as well. So just something to think about as well.
Completely agree. And on the compensation piece, there's so much information out there. There's so many tools where people can go check the market value for their tenures, their roles. You guys can all use things like PayScale or Glassdoor to go check that. But then that's something we do for clients as well, right? When we're brought on to help recruit or with HR or anything, that's something we go do that research for you, right? And we make sure that everyone is paid competitively, right? Because you want to stay like true to the market because other people who are, trying to hire your
They're going to
employees
be going
are
into a
probably
role.
paying market value for that
Yeah.
role.
Yeah. So and I think it's not a situation where people, again, I think it comes back to we get busy, we're not paying attention, everyone seems good, like things are getting done, da 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 da, and we just assume it's okay. But I think it's us proactively like recognizing, like you just said, I mean, we go after passive candidates all the time, people who have jobs, and we're going to go after them with the market value. And a lot, we see it a lot with people, especially candidates who've been in an organization for a long time. They're pretty well established there. We see that their market value is not there. And then that is one of the reasons why they're leaving. Because again, is it really about money, or is it really about not being seen and not feeling appreciated and what the value they're bringing, right? So this is something to think about.
And then, we've already touched on this a little bit, right? But that leadership piece and culture. I mean, I think culture is something a lot of people talk about, right? And how do I get my culture healthy? And then there's, some leaders out there who feel like they have a great culture, but maybe it's not when you kind of pull the wool off, right? So these toxic work environments, so that lack of appreciation, potentially like you have a toxic employee. Everyone has, I think there's a lot of research around that one person in your organization that might be bringing everyone down. Low emotional intelligence with your management. So 69% of people say they would leave their job if they had a bad manager. I mean, that's almost 70%. That's a lot of people that's how important these managers are in your organization.
Yeah, because I mean, if you have one bad apple, like let's just, I don't want to say bad, but one toxic apple that's not the right match. Let's just say they're not the right match. And the company's great. Like you've got incredible leadership, you have all this stuff, but you have this one person. They're really bringing down that group, right? And then you can see it. Like you see a constant turnover within that area, because that's if you're and I've had great managers and I've had managers that weren't as great, and I have to tell you, like going to work every day was much more exciting to be engaged in a company where I felt excited about my manager who supported me and saw me and gave value to me versus one where I felt like I was always in trouble. I was getting yelled at all the time. They were very reactionary based. It was very, and I get it. Like they might apologize. We apologize afterwards, but like but you've already done the damage has already been done. So that's why this emotional intelligence is so important. This is what I tell us, right? As I tell everyone here is that it's not about reaction, it's about response, right? Like it's okay to react. Like you might feel that reaction inside you, right? You want to react right away, but it's really important. Emotional intelligence teaches us that it's really important to take a step back and see the bigger picture of understanding. So I would say if you know you have like a manager that's not a good match, like it's time to really figure out if that's someone that's really a good person for your organization. Because like you said, like the other side of what happens is it's interesting because the revolving door happens, right? We start losing people. We hear it all the time. People are leaving. They don't know why they're leaving, what's going on. And then, but they're holding on to these people that have been there for a long time and they don't want to let them go and they're scared. And these people are really holding their culture hostage in a way, honestly, because they can't keep good people because of these managers. They can't attract good people because of these managers. And these managers have a lot of times they're very high producers, right? They provide a lot of money, but they don't provide a lot of value on their side of it. So it's just something, it's a tricky thing to understand. But again, if you're connection based and you have very high standards of how you treat people and how you expect other people to treat, this kind of goes away because they won't fit into that core values piece. They might have the ability, but they're not going to fit into core values. And you're going to see that right away.
There's all this research out there that say, because you have skill level and then you have emotional intelligence. There's a ton of research that is proving that emotional intelligence is better for productivity and profit than skill based. A lot of people come up in their careers and they're so great at their craft. and they're climbing the corporate ladder into management, but maybe they're not necessarily management material, or maybe they just have to grow more, on that emotional intelligence side of things. And so something I've done in my career, and we did it as a group of managers, is we read this Emotional Intelligence 2.0, and it has a quiz with it, and it basically grades you on every piece of emotional intelligence, from how you handle conflict to how are you with interpersonal communication. And I know I did not score as high as I thought I would in some of those categories, right? It's very eye-opening. And we did it as a group, and all the managers came together, and we were very open about where we were excelling and where we needed to work. And what was great is there'd be at least one or two of us that needed to work on the same area. So we would kind of be accountability partners to each other in growing. And it gives you a lot of ideas on how do you get better in this one area of emotional intelligence. And really, having those emotional cues and understanding how to handle those situations is going to make you a much more effective leader.
Yeah, because it's always comes back to communication, right? Like if we are in reaction, then we can't hear what the other person's really saying. We're only going to be seeing it from a very specific perspective. So I think this is a very fair point. There are a lot of managers, it's not that they're bad managers, they just haven't had the ability to learn the other side of it. They, like you said, they're great at the skills, they're great at getting the job done, but they don't know how to manage people. They don't know how to manage the compassion, the connection, the empathy, and the responsiveness of like stepping back, of emotional intelligence, of understanding something from other people's perspectives, not just ours, right? Like that is what it is to be emotionally intelligent, is to be able to step out of our own whatever bubble and look at it from other people's perspectives as well. So I feel like for me, this is like such a huge reason, because I think of all the other things come into it. I think when you have a great manager, you have work-life balance. They come, you are able to share with your people. You are being paid well. These things all kind of come into it. Because there's so many times where we reach out to candidates and they're not wanting to make a move. Like, no, I don't want to make a move. And they're like, why? Like, I love my manager. I love my company. They treat me so well. We're like, hey, can we come? We want to recruit for you. So like that's it's true. You know what I mean? Nobody wants to leave when they have really great management. They really don't. They want, and then the flip side of that is then a great manager leaves and then everybody leaves with them. You see that too.
Yes, and this is all about, retention, on how you keep those great
Yeah.
managers in your organization,
Yeah,
right?
for
I
sure.
think part of it is too is just being open to growth.
Yeah.
You've done great in your career, you're great at your craft, you're now a manager, but you're still not, you don't have to be perfect, right?
No.
You can be really transparent with, hey, like I know I need to work on this, but like here's what I'm doing. Like always be honest with me,
Right.
about where I need to grow. And I think if your team feels like they can be honest with you, that goes a long way.
Yeah, and I think that comes back to the whole values around humbleness and humility and those types of pieces, which we won't go into that. We'll have a whole webinar about core values, but humility is to me, humility is such a beautiful piece in a manager, because humility means that they can recognize their own, like you said, we're not perfect, we're human, like their own, not weaknesses, but their own places where they need to master that craft, right? And maybe the mastering the craft is the emotional intelligence piece. But again, that comes up to the higher leadership people to be able to recognize that and give, that comes back to your standards and your framework to give your people the choice to choose that. And that's a choice, right? So we can go through all that. We're going to be here for 6 hours, so I try to move on.
And again, I said it earlier, I will be sharing the presentation and all the links to the things we're recommending, and you guys will be able to see all these tips and solutions. I know one we haven't really touched on, but I thought this was really fun in a company I worked at, is competitions, right?
Oh
There's
yeah,
so
those are
many
so
silly
fun.
little, I mean, there's so many things, the emotional intelligent piece, like taking your team, your management team through that process is a little bit longer, right? That's going to take you a couple months, but starting a competition, you can do that tomorrow, and it breeds camaraderie and people can get recognized for things, right?
Yeah, and I think it brings a humanness, right? It brings a fun play element to your organization. It creates this like healthy competition, which I think is really important. And also I think if your managers are involved in this as well, and maybe you have different people and different it allows other people to have connection within other parts of the team as well. So it's something to think about as well. It's an easy thing to implement pretty quickly.
All right. So if you haven't picked up on any of this yet, okay, so here's why we want to retain people, right? It really does pay off on so many levels. So companies who have engaged employees, they're going to experience higher profits, higher productivity, And almost 100% of employees, which is crazy. I mean, a 94% statistic, it's up there, stay at a company longer if you're investing in their career development and their growth. And again, it could be things as big as promotions and things like that, but also as simple as, having that cross-departmental training. Things like that can go a long way, especially if you're just getting started out on creating a growth strategy. And companies with effective retention have 25% lower turnover rates. That's really where it's at, right?
Yeah.
You want people to stay, especially the ones that are really good in your organization.
Yeah, because you want people, you want the right people, and you have the right people, and people who understand your culture, understand live that culture. You don't want to lose them. It is very expensive, and it's very time consuming, and it's stressful, because that's the other thing. Like we hear from, business owners, we work with business owners who are like, I don't know what to do. I keep having people quit. And I have so much business, and I'm laying in bed at night thinking, how am I going to get all this done? How am I? And a lot of times that's why they bring us in, right? Because a lot of times they've tried to do it themselves. They haven't had success. And they're like, what can you do? I'm not obviously not doing it right. I need an expert. So, I mean, I'm telling you, like, it is huge. I mean, I've been in this industry for 20 years, and I look at the people that I've placed over the years, the ones that are still there or have only had a few jobs. I mean, really, it was really the companies that were really connected and had great frameworks and had great leaders. That's why they stayed, for sure.
Right. Is, feeling overwhelmed at this point or isn't sure where to start, we've got you. We're here for you. We love this stuff. We live and breathe it. We're very passionate about it. And we love to do it for our clients' companies, right? We do the recruiting piece. That's probably how you guys know us. But we also are helping companies with HR, with onboarding, with organizational development. We are a consulting firm, so we do this all like we're pretty affordably, right? And on a scale that works for you guys. But we would love nothing more than to help all cultures out there and all leaders be successful.
Yeah, and I think these all four pieces, I mean, we've realized this, right? It's not just the recruiting, because great, you find great candidates. Like, but how do you keep them? How do you manage them? How do you make sure there's like the HR piece? How do we have those surveys, the satisfactions, the compliance, onboarding, we could do a whole thing about onboarding, but onboarding is so important. How do you build that connection, trust with people when they first come on? And then organizational development. How do you really create this positive, engaging environment from day one? So we got you if it's a lot for you, because like Anna said, we really do eat, breathe, and like we are so passionate about this, because we see it firsthand when organizations shift this, and how much more profitability they have, and how much more growth they have, and how much happier they are. And honestly, the owners and the managers are able to have time outside of their business. They're not just in their business 24 hours. They actually do other things. So there's also that as well.
A session. If you're joining us live on LinkedIn, or if you're here in Riverside, we can take your questions via the chat either way. So feel free to drop them now. Suman, we have, it looks like a couple here. So on this first one around, toxic employees. So let's say you've realized someone it's kind of hard for your organization, might be cancer. How do you address that?
I think you go back to your framework. You go back to your framework of your standards and accountability and what your business is based on. And you relay that message to your employee. Like, hey, you make it very black and white. These are the things I'm seeing. These are the things I'm hearing. These are not in alignment with our standards, right? And this is the reason why. And again, it's connection based. We're not reactive based. And then we say, okay, we're going to have a performance plan moving forward. These are what we're going to expect from you. If it's a quality piece, if it's a teamwork piece, if it's a humility piece, whatever it might be. If it's a performance piece, that's easier to evaluate. But typically, if it's something to do like in an interpersonal issue, like within the team, it's really important to just set the guidelines and give them choice. And the thing is a really engaged employee is going to make that choice, and the ones that aren't. So
Yeah, and the coming back to those regular check-ins, right? So if you're checking in with your team once a week or once every 2 weeks very regularly, then I think having these sorts of conversations makes it's a lot easier, right?
yeah,
Than if you're literally like scheduling this check-in with them once in 6 months and it's about some sort of, it's a performance review. It's kind of
Right.
like a, hey, like I've heard these things, we need to have an action plan,
Right.
right?
For sure.
The more open your communication is regularly, the easier it is to have some of the harder conversations.
And I also think it's important to have because gossip happens, things happen, with an organization. So it's important that you go to the source of where this is coming from or the person and ask them what's going on, and so you understand truth. I mean, I say this all the time. It's important to have truth about your organization versus illusion about what's going on. So yeah, for sure.
All right, let's see. It looks like we have one more here, but guys, keep throwing us those questions if you'd like. And then we're also available after this webinar for you guys always if you have other questions. But so on this emotional intelligence piece for managers, how do you hold them accountable? So you've done the book,
Right.
right? How do you keep them accountable to that?
To the emotional intelligence piece.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think I think it's hard to hold someone accountable. Again, I think it comes back to your framework, right? You have these core values, you have what the standards are of your organization, and that's what people need to work within. If people are improving that, that's great. But I think again, it comes back to connection, having conversations, noticing things within the organization. If if an employee's coming to you and saying something about a manager, like, I didn't like the way they spoke to me, I didn't like this, whatever this is, allowing your people to be able to have those conversations around the managers as well, like having an outlet, and then also being able to communicate with your managers as well around it. I mean, we do a lot of things at our organization. We're into we meditate, we do a lot of things around that. We do a lot of things because we're trying to create an environment of not having chaos, right? We want to show up grounded to our people. So I think that if you can teach your people to be grounded, your managers, I think that's really how you hold them accountable. But again, I think it's always going to come back to choice for people if they choose to master it or not.
Situations where, particularly the one where we all read the book, parts of those things that we learned about ourselves became a part of our annual performance evaluation.
Oh, I love that.
Not only were we talking about, okay, so of my job duties, here's where I'm at. For the company goals, here's where I'm at. But for my emotional intelligence goals, here's where I'm
Oh,
at.
yeah, I love
And
that.
I thought that was really cool.
That is
It's
really
again,
good.
it's like you said, it's a harder thing to get around, but just keeping it top of mind, I think, can
Yeah.
help.
And just recognizing what it is and then having the conversations around it. Again, connection.
Yes, connection. How many times do you think we said it, Suman? At least
I mean, if it
at
was,
least 40, if I had to
yeah,
guess.
for sure. If this was my 20s, this would definitely be a drinking game. We did it a lot.
Awesome, guys. Well, we're almost at time. Thank you so much for joining us today. Again, we love to talk about this stuff. We hope you're going to take some actionable things from it. I will be sharing the presentation as well as all of the resources that we shared. But if you'd like to find us online, we're pretty active on LinkedIn, and also we have our website here, cherrytalentgroup.com. And then you can sign up for our newsletter at our website as well. Or if you'd like a one-on-one, Suman does these free of charge to anyone that just has some, every culture is unique, every company is unique. So if you want to talk about your unique situation and challenges, she's here for you to do that. You can reach out to either her or I, and we can get that scheduled for you. All
So,
right. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you
thanks
next
so
time.
much. Bye.
Bye.